want to talk about how we get split. We get split between the idea of mind and body. We feel kind of split from ourselves. We get stuck between conflicting ideas in this idea that there's a right way and a wrong way. And I think it comes from very early on in our conditioning, in the way we're taught, in the way we're taught to relate to ourselves and other ideas. There's this duality happening all the time, right? There's this sense of like self and other, of body and mind. It's a dismemberment. So it's like this. We learn things with little labels and tags. I don't know about you, but like, I remember when I was young, there were these tags that would have like a picture of a boat, and you turn it around and it would say boat, and that's how you learned the word boat. We're constantly learning things in our way of learning that I went through in pictures, in particular pictures, which are just dots. And we don't have context, we just learn the labels in isolation from other things, despite the fact that nothing really works like that. And it's the same when you go onto Google or something and you've got an issue, you're trying to learn, you gather information about your issue or your problem that you're trying to solve, and then you gradually try to connect the dots, which is here. So you go from knowing pretty much nothing to knowing bits of something, to connecting the dots to figure out what the story or the meaning is. So you go from this sense of being a clean slate to being aware of the abstraction, the separation and isolation of all these parts. You're drawn out into trying to understand these parts, and you have to kind of leave that comfortable seat that is your center while you do that. You have to learn about what's not you. You have to deviate from what's comfortable and add things and reconcile them with what you are. So this is our center, this is the periphery. When we're exploring new things, we're moving outward to the peripheral. When we're consolidating and understanding and digesting, we're moving inward. Resting, digesting, and then dealing with external threats, problem solving, going out. These are sort of the two simplest modes of being, expansion and contraction. So this is the duality. Things are being abstracted, drawn away, things are receding, or your sense of self is drifting into forgetfulness while you're running off in the world doing your thing. And you become dismembered in a sense, because you start to identify with life and with yourself through the ideas, through the labels of the things that you're dealing with. You start to think, well, I have a head looks like this. I have an arm looks like this. And we relate to our bodies like this because we relate to everything like this. It's this top-down, broken apart, abstracted, represented way of thinking. Head, arm, torso, leg, all these parts, which actually, in function, are one thing. One thing. One thing. To understand, we have to break apart, and then we put it back together. And we find more efficient ways of putting things back together that require less changes in direction, less negation of the old fact to accommodate the new. We start to create more elegant ways of feeling its center in ourselves while also understanding what seems to be further away. We start to realize it's a circle coming in, going out. And this circle is like this. This is the sense of center we have. This is the sense of safety, home, self, the axis of our being. When you're aligned with that axis, when you're aligned with the poles, you're not aware of the duality, but when you start to deviate from it, when you abstract away or you dismember, you then have to remember. And so a lot of learning is also remembering. It's bringing the parts back together, integrating, consolidating. These words are interesting. So you have abstract, reunite, recede, accede, dismember, remember. When you're remembering, you're taking the parts and putting them into a whole like this. You're recollecting. And you start by doing that with small things like little concepts, your body. And then you start to recollect more. You remember and you reintegrate a broader set of knowledge, and you start to realize that the things that make you you are all these. There are many. And then you start to see the broader context. You remember the bigger picture, which is that you're just a small part of this unknown, multi-dimensional universe. So our sense of self, when we fully understand it and we remember it, when we realize the parts we're made up of, we can see that everything's made up of parts and that there's only this arbitrary boundary between us and everything else. Once we realize that, we see that what we think we are is actually just a part of something. And we realize that's a whole. And then we realize that whole, the whole of our understanding, is still just a part of something else. So as we understand things, we get bigger and more complex. And as we get more bigger and complex, we have to simplify our ways of understanding to make it more elegant, because otherwise we can't hold everything that we are and everything that we do. We have to find these stories, these threads, these continuities to save energy, because it takes a lot of energy to comprehend, to hold everything. So that we don't forget the important stuff, we come up with more flowy ways of understanding, right? So we start to see cycles and circles instead of straight lines. We start to realize that the circles aren't closed loops, they're spirals, you know? We start to see that an easier way of exploring this spiral idea of remembering, coming closer to yourself, and dismembering, being abstracted further away, to recollect again, to remember, integrate more, grow bigger. It can be summed up with simpler symbols, like this. And sometimes it feels chaotic, feels like a random shape, but that random shape, that randomness and that confusion in life is a necessary progression on something which was orderly, but not high-tech enough to grasp the new reality. Life is so complex that you have to throw out your old models all the time. All of these models are wrong, all of them are incomplete. Every way you've ever understood anything ever was incomplete. But you have to upgrade your mental models and your modes of understanding, throw out the old, get new ones sometimes. This is enough to go from here to here. Connecting the dots is enough to go from there to there, but at stage 6, 7 of understanding a particular idea or thing, you have to completely throw away the idea of dots and connections and everything, and you just have to go with a feeling. That feeling can lead you out of what you know as being orderly, but there is a hidden order in all things, and eventually it starts to become simple, and you realize that there are these infinite symbols which represent everything, like the Earth's axis, going away from yourself, coming back to yourself. And within that, we see that there's non-duality wrapped in all of it, that this symbol eventually can represent all of the remembering, dismembering, all of the parts, all of the wholes. It represents the union of everything. The union of separateness and union. So learning all of that and then forgetting it, throwing it all away because you need a new mental model, or you realize that mental models won't help you understand the world. Emptying your brain after having read, researched, learned, so that you can be a beginner again. Forgetting it all, starting again. It's not the same thing as never having known. But at the same time, it kind of feels and looks like it. That's stage 12 in this imaginary 12-stage process of learning and integrating more complex information. It looks a lot like stage 0. It feels a lot like it, but it's not the same. Or is it? Are you remembering? Was there something before this too? And what will be after? So I love this shape. I love this torus shape. This spiraling up, spiraling out, spiraling down, spiraling in. Anything you lose in this shape, anything that you move away from or lose, is instantly and necessarily replaced by gaining something, by integrating something at the same time. So everything you think you're giving up, you're giving it up at the same time as taking in something new, and you just don't realize what that is yet. So that's how I relate to myself. That's how I relate to learning. Bit of a rant, but I hope you find it interesting.